Hey guys, just want to give you a quick update on what's going on with the coronavirus over in China and the rest of the world. Today's guests I've got with me is Kian Golzari. I've got Chris Davey and, of course, Steve Simonson. How you doing, gents? You good?
Very good, Danny. Thanks. Very good. Thanks for having us.
Excellent.
Not a problem. Okay, so just if we go around the room just quickly, obviously, Chris, you're over in the US, can't get back into China at the moment. Kian, you're in the US, where you're normally from China. Kian, you've recently moved to the US, and
That's
you're
right.
staying way away from China at the moment till about June. And
Yeah.
Steve, you're in the EU traveling around, and you're nowhere near China at the moment as well, but you're very close to the action of what's going on. Yeah.
That's right.
So we were chatting briefly off call. Let's work with some statistics at the moment. Chris, you were mentioning there's an upshot in terms of people passing and the spread of the virus and stuff. What's the latest you've seen so far?
Yeah, I mean, yesterday the numbers shot up from like 2,000 cases a day to 14,480. But digging into that, they're saying that they changed the reporting method.
Yeah.
And now that they're reporting on clinical diagnosis, which basically means that they've had an X-ray and they've got the symptoms rather than the test.
Yeah.
From what I've seen mentioned is like some people have been tested 4 or 5 times before it come back positive. So,
Yeah.
but also there was like 242 deaths, and that's just in Hubei. That's just in one province, but that's where most of the cases are. So,
Yeah. What else has been going on, Kian? What's been happening? What have you been hearing like recently when speaking to people?
The thing is, I think it's really important to keep in touch with as many people on the ground there as possible, because you kind of hear like different stories from different people on the ground, because obviously each province is affected differently. Like Wuhan is crazy right now, whereas like other places like Fujian province and like cities like Shenzhou and Xiamen, where I do a lot of business, like I've been speaking to factory workers there, and they say they're going back to work next week. They've only had 8 cases in their city of Shenzhou, where they've got like millions of population. So you don't think it's a big deal over there, but then you hear stories like Wuhan, where it's like no one can leave, public transport is shut down, and then like the hospitals are overcrowded. So depending on which province you're talking to, it's completely different stories to hear. And then obviously the worrying thing is that like Guangzhou is highly affected, which is like the south of China, Wuhan being like more central, whereas places in between are not that affected. So it's kind of in pockets. And a lot of people are asking like, oh, when are factories going back to work and how are shipping times affected? I'm like, it clearly depends on the location of where your factory is located, because it's not like a one size fits all for all of China.
yeah, I think it's even slightly, it's a little bit deeper than that, because we got factories in Xiamen as well that have gone back, but the workforce, like some of their workforce, they told us like half their workforce are from Hubei. Yeah. And like, so there's a lot of people traveling back into that province. And I think this is why the Chinese government are being like very nervous about getting up and running almost as well in some areas, because, although the factory's in Xiamen, that doesn't mean all the workers are from Xiamen. So they're worried that these people bring it to Xiamen or wherever. So Fujian.
Sure.
Steve is just in the chat. He's just shared, if you don't mind jumping in, Steve, this map of the coronavirus. He's just like looking at the matrix screen. Do you want to go through some of this data here, if you don't mind?
Sure. So, a very nice graphical representation of a terrible situation was prepared by John Hopkins, and they've been tracking the data as it's been reported from all the official agencies. And the report shows essentially 60,000 confirmed cases right now, or just past that. And it does play into what Chris talked about. If they have a different methodology, that's why there was a sudden spike yesterday. But it just shows that we're not through it yet. A lot of people in China were thinking, well, within a week or so, it's so much past the quarantine period that it should start settling down. And I think the data shows that we're not near the peak yet. And it's, I don't know when that peak will be, but there's still some pain coming. And obviously the deaths are also increasing. And the nice thing is the recoveries are increasing as well. So, but it's really important to know that, this is only data coming from official channels. So maybe the data is right, maybe it's not right, maybe it's human error, maybe it's politics, I don't know. But one lesson I learned about China is watch what they do, not just what they say. And when you see towns closing off streets and bulldozing dirt to make sure nobody gets in, and farmers with pitchforks guarding from outsiders, there's something serious happening in regions like Kian said.
Yeah, I mean, like just going through some of the data now, if you don't mind, I'll read out a few of these. It's just so total confirmed cases based on this data here is 60,363, with a total deaths of 1,370, but there's a recovery rate of 6,285. So obviously it's 2 to 3x the recovery rate, which shows a positive sign. But do we know still, is there any further down the road, because of avoiding any scaremongering and all that kind of stuff, are we anywhere further down the road? From my understanding, most people that have passed away due to this is down to they're of Asian descent, and they may have some sort of autoimmune disease, or they're not fully functional, like maybe older people passing away. But if you're younger and vibrant and healthy, it's not a problem, or not such a problem, and people are recovering. What's the case there?
Yeah, I mean,
well, from my own perspective, sorry, Chris, just a quick, this is a non-medical opinion.
Yeah.
I think the first reports were this is going to target the elderly or those who are already kind of weakened. But the fact that the doctor who kind of blew the whistle on this thing, who was 34 and passed away, that's a shock to me. And so I don't trust any of that stuff personally, but I'd love to hear what the guys think.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say similar. There's like, there was a guy in Hong Kong, like 36 years old or something like that passed away as well, that didn't have any sort of pre-medical conditions. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what I heard as well. And it's like, I would assume it's more like babies and sort of older generations, which are more affected. But I guess based on those cases, like it could be anyone as well. But I just wanted to say, I think it's really important to check in with your manufacturers, not about your business, but about them. Because like I've had a lot of messages from people saying like, oh, when's shipping going back to normal? And I'm like, you know what, forget all that. We're dealing business with people here. And like in the country, there's people dying. And it's how selfish to like write a message to them and say like, how are my orders being affected? The first question you should be asking are you okay? Is your family okay? Because like I've got a lot of friends over there.
Is there anything I can do? Yeah.
I mean, like thousands of people have died from it. And, the first question you should be asking is, how are your mom and dad? Like, how are your kids, before even talking any business? And that's just like, it's just being a decent human. So I think if you are reaching out to your suppliers, just check in with them if they're okay first before asking any business questions.
Yeah. So we've had dates where people are saying are going back on February the 10th. What have you seen across the board from people that you deal with, the factories you deal with? Is that really come to fruition, or is there still long delays? Because obviously it's going to be different for everyone.
Well, I think that the office workers can go back to work a lot earlier, because even if they are still home, they can work off their laptop. It's more, I think, the factory workers that everyone's a little bit concerned about. And the biggest problem, obviously, was that they just had the Chinese New Year holiday. So the people migration and traveling, everyone's a little bit nervous to travel. So we don't know how many workers are going to return back to the factories. The dates I've been told is that nothing's really happening until March the 1st. Right. And then, for me personally, I'm going to see how it goes after then. But what I am doing is keeping in touch with all the manufacturers to say, hey, if everything does go back to normal on March the 1st, like I kind of want to be first in line, because there's going to be a lot more demand than they can supply. So you kind of want to get yourself to the front of that pecking order just now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, something I would say is it's not unusual actually for factories to take a very long holiday here, like longer than the official date. Sometimes like some of my factories, have taken 6 weeks in a normal year without this problem, So, I mean, similar. We've got notifications that some of ours are back on the 1st. Some of them are back already, but there's problems with shipping. That's what they're telling me. Our goods aren't actually ready to ship yet, but they're telling me at the moment they can't ship anything. And then we have other friends in Shenzhen who actually. They have their own company. They had an office. They were actually working in their office last week. When they tried to go to their office on the 10th of February, they were basically told they couldn't come in. But they were actually in their office the week before with no problems. And they were told they can't come in because they said there's too many people in the building at the moment, which is kind of interesting.
Steve, for someone who brings in pretty much hundreds of containers a year, I know they're kind of spread out. We're talking briefly off call. What kind of impact do you see? We discussed not necessarily today or tomorrow, it's down the road. Can you enlighten the audience so that, best preparation for what they've got, because you do quite large scale, what the impact's going to be across the board?
Sure. So one of the realities is, we have purchase orders placed on a frequent basis, a regular basis, have already been, we've purchased months ahead of time. And so, we have production that's already completed, that's waiting, ready to ship. So that's a port question. When will the port be ready to start moving material? And then we have partially produced products that means the raw materials and everything is probably already there and is pretty much set to go, just need the workers in place. And then there's the pre-production or the supply chain side of it where they're still procuring raw materials. We probably have about 60 days worth of stock because we buy a lot before Chinese New Year. We anticipate, kind of a delay, and we always kind of even buffer the window, like Chris says, because some factories, they'll come back, all the workers will come back, but they'll clean and they'll do maintenance for the first 2 or 3 weeks. And so, for us, even though we know that we have some of our factories that claim to be back in quote unquote production, this is a regional issue. We have other factories like in Changzhou area, none of those factories are back in production. And even as their workers try to come back right now, they can't get back to Changzhou. And this happens in various other cities around China as well. So that getting back is going to be a big problem. So for us, May is when we're going to start seeing sales impacted, because if we don't have our products shipping in the next 2-3 weeks as they should ship, then our supply lines will run out and we'll eventually, mid-April, but probably closer to early May. We're lucky because we can't reroute, 150 containers a month, but we do have some supply lines in Vietnam and Malaysia and other countries that we can route stuff to a certain extent, but that's very complex. The only guys that we can really do that with effectively are factories that have Chinese ownership in those other countries. The boss from China has moved to Malaysia or Vietnam or whatever. And so we can say, hey, produce that in Vietnam and, put me in the front of the line or what have you. And so there's some, we have some advantage there, but it's going to be an impact, and it will create a lot of delays at a minimum. That's the worst case, or that's the best case scenario, is long delays.
Yeah, and you guys raised both good points about shipping as well, because I think that before shipping anything, you have to definitely check with your freight forwarder, because that's been heavily disrupted as well. And I've heard stories of like, okay, the goods may be ready to ship because they might have been produced before Chinese New Year, but the people who work in the customs office are not back to work yet or can't get into their office. So therefore they can't prepare the documents to release them. And then you could get, all sorts of charges at the port and whatnot. So as well as checking in with your supplier, definitely checking with your forwarder. And I've heard that a lot of shipments are going to be disrupted because now there's an imbalance of containers, because a lot of containers have gone back to China, but they've not left China. So there's shipping lines are sort of reducing their capacity, which is going to cause prices to go up. So just definitely make sure you're shipping at the right rates as well, because you might see that your shipping costs might go up significantly as well, which you hadn't previously costed for.
Yeah, we get that problem even with the goods that were already they were landing yesterday, and basically we couldn't get the paperwork released because the logistics company didn't have some VAT invoice from a government office and hadn't been able to pay it. And they hadn't paid it because they were like, oh, we can pay this when we get back from the holiday. There's plenty of time. It won't arrive for another 2 weeks. And then, of course, they're like 2 weeks on, they're still not back at work. So they're still not paying it. But anyway, we managed to get that sorted out, luckily. So, so even you got the goods in the US, you maybe can't get them out of the customs or out of the logistics company. So.
Yeah. Where are we, Steve? So where are you with your shipping companies? I imagine you're using a few there as well. Is there anything you can give tips to the audience as well on top of that? I know that obviously they're not coming back to work, but does it have this, if you find it had the same kind of impact as, with a factory, not all the workers return, do they? So there's a percentage who will leave, and then you're going to be risque by having products manufacturing after the Chinese New Year because they haven't bedded down those new staff who's worked on your previous production, your turns of inventory before. So is there anything that people should be watching out for there?
Well, I will say not just with regard to shipping, fundamentally for shipping, you got to communicate with your freight forwarders and you got to just figure out what's what and be prepared to deal with uncertainty and chaos. That's the rule of the day. And by the way, whining about it and crying about it doesn't do anybody any good. So suck
Everyone's
it up
in the same
and just
boat.
deal with it. Yeah. And listen, we're actually paid to solve problems like this. That's why we exist. So it ain't great. The humanity piece is, viscerally terrible, but we have to just carry on and keep calm. So the other thing I would just say with regard to the factories is I would be personally very careful. So we buy everything on terms. So I don't pay anything up front, but for those who pay things up front and pay deposits, I would make sure I would probably do some sort of pre-inspection or try to get eyes on actual raw materials or production before I start sending money around. There will be, in my estimation, a significant impact to smaller factories, kind of a house of cards effect potentially, where raw materials don't happen, or there's some series of problems that happen where they may not even be able to control it. In good faith, they may not have, tried to fail, but there's going to be a lot of failures as a result of this.
And obviously loss of revenue and earnings and stuff. Do you think, and I mean this in a kind way, is that they'll take the money in good faith, but they can't deliver on it, like you said, because they're not going to be able to get all these moving parts like the raw materials from all these different factories, because like there's so many loose ends there to take care of.
That's my opinion. I think the difference between placing an order in November versus, February or spending money is significantly higher risk right now. And again, I don't think it's, anything nefarious. I think it's just circumstance. And so I would make sure you see raw materials. I'd make sure you see workers before I would start putting money across to the folks, only to say, money in, product out, and really squeaky wheel gets the grease. There are all kinds of problems. Shanghai just issued a memo that said all government-owned property owners, state-run property owners should give 2 months of free leases to their tenants that are small and medium businesses, right? Start thinking about they still have to pay their, many of the workers, that are on salary, they have to pay rent, they have to pay all these fees. There's going to be a lot of consequences. And they're talking about how they restructured debt and they're not going to count the banks for delays in loans and things like that. They're trying to do a lot of the things right, but there will be unintended consequences from that. And I just want people to be really careful with their money. So maybe pre-inspection, raw materials, production actually happening, mid-inspection, maybe that's unnecessary, but certainly post-inspection as normal.
Appreciate
and
it.
Be very careful.
Yeah. And if you can get factory visits in and stuff like that, that'll be good. Okay, next question. So
I wouldn't go to the factory personally, just to be clear.
No, someone else can take care of that on the ground. So next question. So this could be hypothetically speaking, because we don't know where it's going to go yet. You're sitting on a load of stock, but you know that at some point that you're going to run out. What's your latest strategy? What would you do now? Do you go out on your shield and sell your stock through? Do you put your prices up? What do you do? Do you drip feed to prepare for what's going on? Do you go for continuity or go out on your shield? What's your take, Steve, first?
Well, I think that's it's a business question for each business. We look for, gross profit contribution. Yeah. And so we will actually raise prices if necessary to make sure the gross profit maintains some sort of equilibrium.
Yes.
That can work against you with ranking on Amazon and the buy box in the whole scenario. So you have to really be cautious about that. But by the same token, even if you lose rank, if you sell out of everything, that doesn't help you anymore. It's
going to take a while to get back in.
Yeah. And ultimately, because we don't know enough yet, I think running out of stock and sacrificing margin to me is a short-term solution. I think long-term, and I would rather play it slow and just remember that, this is not the same as, the guy selling masks at 900% markup, right? We literally have to feed a bunch of people, and we only do that with gross profit, gross margin contribution. So I generally will take the view of, raising the price very slowly and then trying to maintain ranks on Amazon and other marketplaces as best we can.
And in some cases, just doing nothing, wait and see. I mean, obviously you can't sit still forever, but sometimes it's best to take a view, isn't it? Step back, look at the landscape and then adjust to what's happening. Chris, what about you? What's your plans?
Well, similar to Steve, we have a pretty good Chinese New Year strategy. So I always plan to get last delivery leaves at the end of December, and I'm not expecting another shipment out of the factory until early April, which is a huge window. But I've had my fingers burnt in that period before with bad quality, not enough staff, not enough capacity, etc., etc. So we've got quite a lot of stock in place there. my thinking at the moment, and I may be wrong, is that probably my competitors are probably not as good at planning as I am. So I'll be running with stock for a lot more than them, longer than them. But that also means that my stock's going to start running out quicker at some point when all these other people who are my competitors start running out of stock. I don't think there's much I can do about it. I don't really plan to hike the prices up too much, because from previous experience, when I've hiked them up a reasonable amount to try and slow it down, then I've started getting like negative feedbacks from people saying, oh, I bought this, it's $40, I don't think it's worth it. So I plan just to try and ride out the wave, and hopefully we have really good relationships with the factory. I'm lucky enough to have Cindy on my side, so she has been talking to all the factories and that. We have a really good relationship there, and we only work with pretty small factories that, you know, hopefully won't be affected too bad. So that's kind of where I am at the minute. I'm not really planning to ramp the prices up too much. I'm just wait and see. I think it's early days, but I definitely think, you know, we should be good for a while at the moment. So
cool. Kian, what about you and your clients?
Yeah, I mean, I think for everyone looking at their own business, it kind of purely depends on your inventory levels. And luckily for us, like a lot of our business is off of Amazon, and a lot of it is like B2B business. And we actually own our own warehouses as well. So we've got and when we tend to order stock, we tend to, you know, order it like a year in advance as well for certain products, which are very seasonal. So we're actually well stocked. We have our own warehouse, so we're not really paying many like logistics costs or warehousing costs. So for us, it's actually okay, and the sort of the nature of our business, which is more B2B as well, it's not as badly affected. So I would say just sort of look at your own inventory levels. And then it also depends on the type of products that you're selling, which if it's going to be affected by delays based on what's going on in China as well. So obviously masks being the crazy one, but anything else which you may feel that you may not be able to get for a long time, maybe something which is specifically made in the Wuhan area, then you know, you might want to sort of rethink your pricing strategy.
Cool. So if we're to synopsize, if that's a word, synopsize, if we're going to kind of roll everything into one, top 3 things from you guys to do right now, whether that's do nothing and sit and wait, or key things to think about on your Amazon business.
Well, I guess I'll start do you want all 3 from me, Danny, or can I just do one?
You can do one, and I can take one of each. It's up to you, as many as you want. It's up to you, Steve.
Well, I first of all, I think that, you know, communication with your suppliers and communication with your freight forwarders is the number one thing that you can do. And you have to be patient, and you have to be reasonable. Nobody's in control here. This is the ultimate unknown. It's the ultimate wild card. And just prepare for chaos. You know, one of my colleagues, one of my team in China, he noted that in Shanghai, through the Hangzhou train station on Monday, 100 people got picked out of the train queues for being high temperature and sent to isolation. And that was kind of the first day the train station was really back in action in a heavy way. And so we don't know what's going to happen yet. And so, you know, planning or at least expecting uncertainty can at least help you prepare and just kind of ideate, you know, what are possible solutions? Is it an alternative? Can I move it to another country? Can I support the supplier by, you know, giving them some extra time or extra money or extra whatever? There are lots of ways to ideate and solve problems, but, you know, we're in this business to solve problems, so deal with it.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, and just to further, sorry, what Steve was saying as well, I would say that for me personally, and for these guys as well, I'm sure like doing business with China is all about relationships. And so for this reason, this is a key opportunity to strengthen your relationships. You know, I would message every single one of your suppliers. If you're very close with your suppliers, then call them and just call them to see if they're okay, because compare yourself to maybe another Amazon seller who's not been in touch during this virus period, and 6 months down the line, you both need a favor at the same time. They're definitely going to favor the people which actually cared and got in touch and sort of dealt with the sort of human side of things. So I would just say definitely call your most important suppliers, but also drop all of them a message just to make sure they're okay.
Yep. Makes sense. Chris?
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, I think relationships are key as well. I mean, immediately this started to get serious like 2 or 3 weeks ago. We were calling in with all our suppliers. We were WeChatting. We were asking them, are they okay? Is there anything they want? Like we were even helping some of them find face masks in Shenzhen and then shinfonging them. Couriering them up to them. Yeah, because actually we have a relationship with the pharmacy near our house. So so we were managing to get masks from the pharmacy even though we weren't there and send them to people. So I mean that's really key. I do have another worry. I don't know if you know, but there's apartment blocks in some areas. If one person's found with the virus, the whole apartment block is going into shutdown and like into quarantine. And one of my friends was telling me one of their friends got back to their apartment block, and basically the apartment block's all sealed, and there's a note there saying someone's been found with the virus in your apartment block, report to the hospital. Now I'm thinking what happens in factories is everyone lives in dormitories that are attached to the factory. What happens if someone ends up in that dormitory with the virus? Are they going to basically tell all the workers they're not allowed out of the dormitory, and then they can't go back into the factory? So it could just be one person that shuts the factory down. Yeah.
That makes sense. I've got some questions here actually on the wall from Facebook here. So Anthony James says, Steve, do you think the Chinese government will provide financial assistance to failing, struggling companies? I'm assuming he's thinking about factories in China.
For sure they will, and they are. They're telling banks how to restructure loans. They don't have to report loans that are in arrears 60 days. That's normally a negative thing for a bank. That's not necessarily a good thing for financial transparency, just so you know. But they're going to do a lot of things. But the problem is it's a typical pyramid. The guys at the top of the pyramid and the state-run, they're going to get everything and every benefit. The guys at the very bottom, the smallest folks, many of which Amazon sellers deal with, they don't necessarily, it doesn't always trickle down. And so, yes, there will be help. And yes, I think China's taking aggressive measures, but I just, it's not going to get to everybody. And again, some of it is just the laws of mass. There's just too much to manage. And, there are risks that were not here 6 weeks ago.
There is another question. Hopefully I'm not butchering their name here. Yuhadu Gurez. I'm getting a sample today from the province 500 miles from Wuhan. Is it safe to open? I would say it depends. Example, so I spoke to someone who's a mask specialist who sells on Amazon. That, the people were refreshing the mask, washing them. So the bacteria in it can still contain the virus. So it depends on what it is. But what's your take on it?
According to WHO, the World Health Authority, it's fine to open it. They said it only lives on surfaces for a short period of time. So, just referring back to WHO. So,
and I heard that as well. And that just remember, how your goods actually arrive, whether it's by container or by air freight. I don't think, and I'm not a medical expert, so please don't quote me on this. But I heard that
you get buried for it.
I heard that the virus can't survive on packaging or boxes or something like that. It's more human to human touch. So I don't think products or packaging or anything like that can spread the virus.
I think the only thing what the guy was saying, I can't remember his name, it might have been Matt, is that if you wash the mask through and you've got the virus and give it to someone else to use, it's still got bacteria. So traveling distance, fair enough. But it can be, by his admission, it can be transferred that way. So you do have to be careful with that. But like you said, in most cases, if it's samples, I think it'll be fine. Is there anything you gents want to add before we go?
One thing I would just, sorry, Kian, I'll let you get in there. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to finish on a positive note, just to say, obviously, hope this all clears up as fast as possible, and just wishing the best to all our friends over in China.
Yeah, exactly. Steve?
Well, geez, now I've got to put a cloudy that. Dang it,
we're going to go downstairs again. Go on, Steve, go for it.
All right. First of all, our real warm wishes are true, and they're, I have my team. I've asked my team, to take extra cares, extra measures. They did not go to their families for Chinese New Year. There's a lot of different things happening right now, and it's all in the quest of safety and health and taking care of each other. So that's really important. My concern, I think, at the big picture level is President Xi just went out and basically said, stop putting so many heavy restrictions on people. We need to get the economy going. And that's a competing thing to humanity. So, and he had been fairly, let's say, absent publicly for some time. In his first outing, he basically was like, stop doing so many restrictions on people. And obviously they're going to listen. And so this is a potential, like a slingshot. We're making some progress, but it could get to be a more negative situation if people don't take this thing seriously. I think China's done a lot of really good things here, even though they seem draconian, but I do have concerns that the economic pressure will be unbearable for China, and they're going to make some mistakes. And so I want everybody to just, take that into consideration, that now's a good time to consider alternative supply lines and be creative.
Okay, I've got one for you. Because of the nature of China, like you said, the laws and, the culture and everything else, do you think any other country or Western country in the world would have tolerated that? Could you imagine in the UK if it broke and being told, right, you've got to stay in your house, you've got to do this? People just go, no, fuck that. Do you know what I mean? They would revolt, they would go against the grain and make it even worse. And I think in some cases, lucky it is China, because they're culturally, people are going to toe the party line, for a better word.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Cool. All right, gents, it's been wonderful. Thank you for coming today to share with everyone. Hopefully everyone who's listening would got some benefit from that. Wishing everyone well. Make sure, your businesses are safe, and just try, carry on as normal as you can. And we'll give you some more updates as and when we have some more information. So see you all now, and take care. See you soon.
All the best. Cheers.